So welcome everyone, and really appreciate your time at the end of what is always a long school day. So in today's session, we're going to be looking at some pathways to support progressing to GCSE and Grade 4. So this is really focused at supporting those students that we know are really going to struggle to meet that Grade 4 or even possibly to access a GCSE Grade 1. So we're going to take a look at that in more detail in this course. So just a quick intro, I'm Vicky, I'm the Subject Advisor for Maths and Statistics at Pearson. You can see a few ways on screen that you can kind of get in touch with me, and I do some monthly updates that you can sign up to as well. But I was a maths teacher in state secondary for 9 years previous to joining Pearson, and also a head of year there. So I had a lot of insight into, which there was a great role for getting lots of insight into all the various barriers that students can face, not all of which are to do with their understanding of maths, but do come into the classroom. And so hopefully we're going to give you some really good strategies, some really good resources to take away today to help your students. So in this overall course, it's split into 2 sessions. So session 1, don't worry if you missed that. The slides and a recording are available on the Maths Emporium, and the slides are available on the website as well. And in session 1, all we did was to look at what are the different qualifications that are available in complement to or as alternative to the GCSE. So we looked at the entry-level certificate, and we looked at level 1, level 2 Edexcel awards in number and measure, and also the functional skills qualification. So it was a bit of an overall explainer, what the content is, who they're aimed at, what's different between those 2 qualifications, how they're assessed, all of that kind of just need to know info. So in session 2, we're going to build on that knowledge today to start to look at, right, well, how could we maybe incorporate some of these resources, these other qualifications, into some pathways for our students to help them have, I suppose, the most successful maths journey that they can. So key points from session 1. So the entry-level certificate. This is typically aimed at learners who are working below a GCSE Grade 1 level. So these are your learners that got lower levels of attainment. They've kind of throughout their school career probably been working below age-related expectations, and they might really just struggle with that traditional format of a qualification. So it supports their basic numeracy with some tests and tasks that are really just designed to give the students the best chance to show the maths that they can do. So that is for students who are working below GCSE Grade 1. We've got functional skills. So this is something that you might have heard of. This is available at entry level, so below GCSE, at level 1, so kind of comparable in demand to a GCSE Grade 1 to 3, and at level 2, which is a much higher level of demand. It's, you know, a GCSE Grade 4 and above is a level 2 qualification. So functional skills, as the name suggests, has got a real practical, real life focus. So it's very heavily based in problem solving in context. So the problem solving element forms 75% of the assessment objectives at all levels for functional skills. So there's a high literacy, high kind of comprehension demand that goes along with that. Makes it really suitable for some learners to engage, particularly that real life context, but could be a barrier for some other learners. So then we've also got the Edexcel awards in number and measure. And so the aim of these qualifications is to enable students to develop a really kind of thorough knowledge and just a proficiency in those mathematical techniques that are really key to what they need to be able to do to succeed. And there's a significant amount of crossover here with the GCSE content. The assessment objectives, it's all focused around understanding and using the mathematical techniques. So in line maybe with the AO1 objective of GCSE maths, it's about being able to perform those routine procedures. And with that significant crossover, of course, it gives a really great grounding for then further progression to the GCSE. So let's dive into the kind of the focus of session 2 now. So First of all, we're going to just look at some first steps. The first things you kind of want to be considering as you start to think about the best ways we can support the students that we're looking to support in this session today. We'll then have a look at some of the possible pathways that we might be able to provide for students who are working towards GCSE and that eventual grade 4. And we'll also look at some really key, some suggested strategies and loads of great resources from the Maths Emporium to support your students. And we'll look at, well, what are you going to do with these guys if we're identifying them at key stage 3? What about if we're at key stage 4 and so on? So we'll look at some year 11 intervention strategies as well. And then we'll also have a little bit looking at supporting students with SEND. So those first steps, a lot of the stuff here, you're already going to be doing this, just as part of the, your transition for students, kind of welcome them into the school. But just a reminder, really, it's about that early identification of those learners who are likely to need enhanced support. And I suppose my key message here is that you go getting, the maths department involved with that, not just that it being the Senko or the pastoral staff, the head of year, that someone from the maths team is working with those pastoral staff with Senko to identify those students at a really early stage and actually get involved in that transition as well. So, looking at enhanced support for that transition from year 6 to year 7 for those students, and what might that look like? It might be inviting a small group of students for a little bit of a one-to-one, small group session with one of your most engaging maths teachers and just getting some time with them to get to know them a little bit better before you've got them through your door in September. Early meetings with the families and with Senko to discuss pathway options and support. So hopefully what you kind of take away from this session is maybe what some of those pathways could look like for students. So that you've got some options there that, when you identify students that, that traditional key stage 3 into GCSE, it's not going to work for them, or they're just going to need something slightly different, that you've got some options there. And you can discuss that, and kind of, get them on board with it, get families on board with that at a really early stage. One of the key things as well, I think, is, just thinking about, how, that use of capitation or even pupil premium funding to set your students up for success. I always really advocate a maths toolkit. Obviously, there's 2 kinds of maths toolkit. You've got like a physical one, but also we're going to equip them with, that kind of mental, the skills, the knowledge, the resilience. That's their other toolkit. But, in terms of practicalities, some manipulatives, the equipment that they need, in a form that's going to be most usable by them. A calculator, actually getting that for them. It should be the same calculator that every student has. I'll touch on this in the next point. But getting that all set up in a really nice little organized little kit for them. Label it with the name. Give them help to store it, a routine that they might have maybe with a learning support teaching assistant, where they know where they go and collect that equipment from at the start of the lesson and where they need to put it back at the end of the lesson. So really getting them set up to manage that themselves, but obviously in the most supportive way possible. And then this final point here is, something that can really get missed for students who struggle with numeracy, because quite often we get students and they're struggling with the times tables, they're struggling maybe with basic calculations. And so we kind of think, we're going to have to spend loads of time on that. We really need to get that basic arithmetic to be able to do that. And the calculator skills use maybe gets it's not given the priority that it should be. And Jo Morgan did a really interesting kind of podcast about this with Craig Barton, where she talked about how actually, in her school, they had a real change of mindset to make calculator use the default in their lessons from year 7. This is for all students as well, because what they were identifying was that not being able to use a calculator was, it was a barrier, it was an extra barrier for students in accessing some other mathematical concepts. So because the cognitive load of having to deal with the arithmetic student wasn't able to cope with, for example, finding a missing angle. Whereas actually, given a calculator to do that, that just lessened that load so that they were able to access that concept and develop that understanding and practice that skill. So, you know, it's something to kind of have really good think about, discuss with your department. You know, is this something that we feel would be beneficial for students in our setting? You know, and ensuring that all students have the same model of calculator and they use it in every lesson. So even when you're having a specific non-calculator skills lesson, they're going to be using that calculator to check their answers. So if we're doing our fraction calculations, we're then going to check every single answer by using the fraction buttons in our calculator. And we're building both skills then. So you're getting a bit of a double whammy if you adopt that approach. And it can be really helpful for students that really struggle with that arithmetic, particularly helpful for them. So a note on pupil premium, just because we did mention, you know, kind of investing a little bit of capitation or some funding into maybe setting students up with a toolkit, is that the pupil premium guidance, it's worth just being familiar with that, because it does quite clearly state it doesn't have to be used solely for the benefit of pupil premium students. You can use it on whole class approaches. So if you wanted to invest in some, you know, manipulatives, equipment or training to help improve the quality of teaching for a particular class or cohort of maybe lower retaining students, it should be okay to use pupil premium funding for that. I think, you know, there's probably a caveat there that, you know, that's given that there were at least some pupil premium students within that group. But the EEF is also quite clear on this point as well. You know, they're kind of dispelling it, doing a bit of myth busting here, saying, well, pupil premium is actually designed to support schools to raise the attainment of disadvantaged students. But however, many of the most effective ways to do this will improve quality of teaching for all and benefit other groups. And that's fine. Just make sure that strategies have pupils that are eligible for pupil premium firmly in focus. So investing like something like Revise Online, which gives all the students in your school equal access to online, high quality revision resources for all of their subjects. You know, that is something that it might be worth looking into, you know, whether your pupil premium funding could be used for something like that, which will have an even greater impact for those students that have got some barrier, some disadvantage. So just a note about pupil premium. So it's worth having that discussion within your school. So let's look at some possible pathways, kind of strategies and resources now. So imagine we've identified our students kind of maybe in year 6, or as they've come through the door in year 7, we've got, you know, we've got some names of students, or we're immediately picking up these students are maybe going to need something different to support them most effectively. So as a bit of an overarching kind of just visual here, what we've got is obviously along that top row, you've got your traditional, what students would, you know, is the kind of the default setting is, you know, they study the Key Stage 3 curriculum through years 7 to 9, and then they'll be studying GCSE. I know a lot of schools start the GCSE in year 9, but as a general, breaking it down to Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4. Underneath, what I'm trying to do is just to put the qualifications that we discussed in session 1, just show you essentially where they could sit. So imagine if you've got students coming in at the beginning of year 7, you know, something like, for a student, we know they've got significant barriers here. Actually, getting that grade 1, grade 2 is going to be a real challenge for them. And so maybe looking at incorporating entry-level certificate and working up through the levels of entry levels 1, 2, 3 could be something that gives a real focus and some measures of success as they're working through year 7 and 8. From year 9 onwards, you could look to incorporate our access to foundation tier resources. We touched on this in session 1, but essentially this is a pack of resources designed to bridge the gap from entry level 3 to GCSE kind of grade 1. And in complement as well, the Edexcel award in number and measure level 1 is also something that could be suitable for students from year 9 onwards. There's that real crossover with the GCSE, and it's really about building those foundational skills. Just as a bit of a kind of a side note here, throughout all of this, you don't actually, this is not saying about necessarily you don't have to enter the students for these other qualifications, but there's no reason why you can't use the resources, use the practice papers, use the past papers, use the topic worksheets from these other qualifications to just supplement your GCSE or your Key Stage 3 curriculum with them. Obviously you do have that legal obligation to deliver the national curriculum. So students should be being exposed to that. But there's no reason why we can't kind of supplement or just choose what we focus the most time on, and that might be focusing on those core skills that are developed through maybe an alternative qualification like the Edexcel award. At the bottom we've got functional skills there. The reason why I've put entry-level functional skills as really only being suitable from year 9 onwards is just because of the fact that it's so heavily based in kind of real life and context-based problem solving. So a lot of the scenarios are essentially set up to help students to do real life maths in the real world, or as part of maybe their first steps in employment. So a lot of the context, just that kind of the age-related comprehension that goes with them, it wouldn't really make it suitable for those younger students in year 7 and 8. But from year 9 onwards, maybe students would be able to engage with those contexts and understand those. So the functional skills qualifications as well are available there. And again, just kind of saying, well, the level 1, you could look at to introduce that from year 9 onwards. And now on the level 2 quals, they are quite challenging in demand, and so they're not necessarily something that might be suitable for your students at this stage, but it's just they're there to give you an overview of what is available, and kind of when it might be appropriate to use resources or kind of support from those qualifications. Before we move on to the next slide, I just want to kind of make the point about non-entry for GCSE. So as I mentioned, there is a legal obligation to deliver the national curriculum. However, there's not a legal obligation to enter a student for their GCSE. So some schools may choose for some students non-entry as an option. In practice, this happens very, very rarely because obviously the implications for performance measures. So, if you've got a student who is looking at a grade 1 or grade 2, it's not a sensible move to not enter them for the GCSE in terms of your performance measures. It might be something you consider for the general well-being of that child if the individual circumstances are a factor in that. Where non-entry for GCSE, can be something that is a sensible option. Might be where you have a student who is really far off a grade 1, and actually we're just going to focus on delivering that entry-level certificate with them and getting them successfully to achieve that qualification, in which case you can choose not to enter them for the GCSE, but as I say, obviously there's the performance measure implications of that, so just to be aware. So what might these potential pathways look like in practice? So on screen here, I've tried to kind of give an overview of, well, if we did take some students in at year 7 and we're saying like an alternative pathway, a more supportive pathway might be more appropriate for them, this might be something that of how we structured it. So looking at an entry level certificate over those kind of years 7 and 8. So what we've done there is we've just kind of put the 2-year course planner for entry-level certificate into those years 7 and 8 to kind of give you a view of what that could look like. And as you see, it's really heavily focused in developing an understanding of the number system, place value, being able to recognize and work patterns and simple shapes and concepts of measure units. You could then, obviously students could work towards gaining an assessment, maybe in the year 8. You could even, if you've got students might do entry level 1 in year 7 and maybe entry level 2 or 3 in year 8. Year 9, I've put in there the scheme of work for the Edexcel award in number and measure, level 1. So you can kind of see what that looks like. And again, all the kinds of topics that it's covering in a lot of depth. So this is about really developing those proficiency with things like rounding, their 4 operations, working with decimals, working with units, simple tables and charts, lots of work with fractions, decimals and percentages, and the key concepts of measure like perimeter and area and time as well, something we know that all students perform really poorly on, anything to do with time at foundation. So just investing a bit more time in that, really. And obviously there's an opportunity for them to sit an exam. Again, if students did want to have a go at gaining that qualification, the Edexcel Awards, there are June series and there's a January series as well. So as you can see on here, we've got the June series. You could look to do that at the end of year 9. And there's a Jan series, which, students might try for in maybe the January of year 10. They might even try to work towards a level 2, who knows? Then what I've done with the year 10 and 11 here is just to kind of put a little bit of a reduced version of our GCSE foundation scheme in here. So this is kind of the core scheme of work, but obviously you're not necessarily going to do every little last bit or spend as much time on some content areas as you are on others. So things like, trigonometry, yes, we might expose students to that in year 11 as part of some work or as part of some starters and things, but are we going to really invest lots of significant time in that? Or are we going to really focus on those key concepts of kind of fractions, decimals, percentages, ratio, and things we know students can be really successful with, like the statistical diagrams. Yes, students are going to need those basic algebra skills, so we still need to be spending lots of time on those, but maybe focusing on those skills in a bit of a discrete way, rather than being able to solve a big problem algebraically. You'll notice I've put a little red circle around ratio and an arrow there, because I think in the scheme of work as it stands there, that wouldn't get hit until year 11, but I would absolutely, for my students that are going to need that extra support, particularly working towards grade 4, I'd want them to be getting those core concepts of ratio really early on in year 10, so that we could be doing loads of retrieval practice and just kind of interleaving that throughout, because I think that's a really core area. So retrieval practice is key. We know that the evidence for that for all students, but for students with special educational needs in particular, repetition and familiarity is what is really going to build confidence and competence. So every lesson starter should be incorporating our essential skills. Students just need to be practicing these all the time, and getting that success, that familiarity. We'll look at ways that you can build such starters, so so that they are closely aligned to what students are then going to expect to see in the end exam. We've got some great 1-mark starters on the Emporium, links to those later in the session. Obviously, that's kind of like an ideal scenario where we've identified our students kind of really early on, and we've got this kind of 5-year plan for them. But as we know, you're going to have students that are already in your classrooms today in years 9, 10, 11 that are staring down the barrel of the GCSE, and we're thinking, oh my God, what we're going to do. They're really not experiencing success. and it's not working for them. So how do we support those students kind of now? So obviously it's going to, the key is going to be about assessing their starting point. So depending on which students we're thinking about, end of year 9, start of year 10, if you're just looking at Key Stage 4 as a whole, or if I've got my students that are in year 11 right now, have I got a recent, bit of assessment or can I do something that is going to just give me a very clear indication of what their current working level is. So if they're currently working below a GCSE, then these are the group of students that I would really be considering an entry-level certificate for. Or you could look at entry-level functional skills. Again, I'd refer back to session 1 to understand maybe which groups of students each one would be more suitable for. They are internally assessed, these entry-level qualifications. So you as the teachers would be, supporting kind of, administering those assessments within the classroom. You'd be marking those yourself. And then obviously they're kind of submitted for to be externally moderated. So there's plenty of support Pearson can give you with that, because it's not something that as maths teachers, if you've ever delivered that kind of thing before, that you might have much confidence or familiarity with. But I have lots of my bookings, my one-to-one bookings with schools and teachers are from teachers who are looking, have identified I need something alternative, for my student. I've got students working below GCSE. We're looking at entry-level certificate. Can you help us get set up to deliver at? I've never done it before. What do I need to do? So we can talk you through that process. I would also I think, it's important to have, again, high targets, ambitious targets for students. So even if you've got a student who's currently working below GCSE level, and an entry level certificate is definitely maybe going to be the correct first port of call for them. But could they progress to an Edexcel award level 1 maybe for the June series of year 11, maybe as an alternative to the GCSE, giving them an opportunity, maybe a greater opportunity to get a level 1 qualification. If you've got some students that are really going to struggle to get that grade 1, but they can kind of do quite a few bits of discrete bits of maths, when they're just directly told to do that, then that qualification could give them a great opportunity to be able to demonstrate that they can, add 2 decimals together. They can work out a simple percentage of a number without them having to kind of interpret a question to understand that that's what they need to do. So again, that's something that could be a really nice progression and give them the opportunity of getting a level 1 qualification, which a GCSE at grades 1 to 3 is a level 1 qualification. So, it's a higher level than that entry level. A lot of our students are going to fall into this next category, which is they're currently kind of working within the range of GCSE grades 1 to 3. But they might feel a really long way off grade 4. So for this group of students, what I would kind of really consider is possibly starting that GCSE course rather than just going, oh, well, I'll take my GCSE scheme of work and just try and adapt my lessons for these students or do the best that I can with it. Maybe look at, having an alternative scheme for these students that starts the course with the Edexcel award in level 1, to really help them develop that proficiency in those key skills and to give you a really good understanding actually of, what they can and can't do. Because then we can really build that toolkit of skills before we start to hone in the focus on question interpretation, problem solving, multi-step problems, maybe in the year 11. You could, again, you don't have to sit for the qualifications. You might just use the resources, but you could give students the opportunity to sit for those exams. You could look at doing the level 1 in June of year 10 or January of year 11. It could be a great confidence boost and an opportunity to gain some valuable real exam experience as well, which, in terms of just they've sat a real maths exam that they've been successful in, and in advance of going into that final GCSE, that it's kind of priceless, really, in terms of just boosting their confidence and giving them that motivation, that knowledge that they can be successful with a maths exam. The Edexcel Award Level 2 could be, especially the resources for that, could be really great in helping your students who are targeting a grade 4. And again, you could consider entering those students, for that Edexcel Award Level 2, because they could have a great chance of gaining Level 2 qualification there. I've put in the bottom here, kind of considering functional skills as an alternative for students. I think particularly students who struggle to really engage in maths without a context. We know those students are the ones who go, when am I ever going to use this? Or you're constantly having to put it into a context that they can relate to and engage with, because it has got a real clear real life application. It could also be really useful for those students you've got who are just, you just don't see them enough, or they're struggling to attend for whatever reason. There's greater opportunity with functional skills for kind of some form of online delivery, and there is an option for on-screen assessment. So if you've got a student who is non-attending, might have anxiety about, coming into a school setting and sitting in an assessment in a school, then they could do the online assessment with remote invigilation from the comfort, the security of their own home. So, the functional skills qualifications can, I think, be particularly useful for those students. And then obviously, we also want to look at some targeted interventions. So we'll have a look at some samples of those in a moment. So what could this look like in practice for you students who are kind of maybe coming in at year 10? Excuse me. I've kind of just done a little bit of kind of summary here of using some of the schemes of work. So, right, if I just assume, and it's a fairly, nice low estimate here, I think most schools would have more than 3 hours a week on their timetable for maths. So it's got a nice bit of leeway in here. But as an alternative to just ploughing on with a GCSE scheme of work, if I did something a little bit more bespoke that starts off with my Edexcel Award in number and measure, this is what my first 2 terms would look like. It'd be that level 1 Edexcel Award. In the summer of year 10, then we'd be looking at kind of retrieval of that level 1 content, excuse me. And we'd also start to look to extend that into the level 2 topics as well. So again, it's all of those really key areas, but where we're extending it. So we're starting to work with, into more decimal places, and we're going to start working with negative numbers, for example, here. I've got an opportunity for my students to sit for the Edexcel Award exam at the end of year 10. Again, just building that confidence, gaining that exam experience. And then as we start year 11, we're kind of finishing up on the Edexcel Awards Level 2, which you can see starts to bring in those simple concepts of ratio and proportion. You've got some things work on volume, for example, as well. And then there's an opportunity for them to sit that January exam. If you've got your students that are really flying with it, they could be sit a level 2 in January, or it might be that, your students that are just really wanting to get mastery of that content, maybe do the level 1 Edexcel Award in that January sitting. And then I'd be ploughing onto, right, what's the GCSE content that we've not covered in depth in the Edexcel Award? So these are the kind of things that, we really need to be focusing our time on now as we're kind of getting right into the middle of year 11. So all the stuff like algebra, the basics, substitution into formulae, that's a really key skill. We'll see on the next slide. Things like scatter graphs, we know students can be really successful with those. Solving simple linear equations is really key. And then, of course, you've got, your geometry work and statistical kind of graphs, work with averages, etc. there. I think what's quite nice here is it kind of leaves that kind of back end there is we're building on that work with ratio and looking at some things like probability as well, where you do need a really sound understanding of decimals, percentages, etc. But it gives you a really nice focus for that last little stretch into the exam prep. And again, yes, there's things that are on the GCSE scheme that aren't on here. There's no significant lesson time planned for trigonometry, for example, or for Pythagoras. I'd probably look at doing Pythagoras through I'd have it as like a daily start, and it'd just be one question we did every day to just give familiarity with that. But I'm not going to invest maybe significant lesson time in it. So yes, students may be well exposed to the full GCSE content, but it's obviously up to you, your professional judgment about what you choose to really invest significant lesson time in. So these are maybe the areas where I would just suggest that it would be useful to have that kind of the significant lesson time on. Next slide, I think I'm going to come back to this one when we look at interventions, but I think it's just useful at this stage to kind of just have a little bit of an overview of this. So I've done a little bit of work earlier over the past few months of just analysing all of our performance on past paper questions and looking at where we see the biggest differences in performance between the grades. So for example, what is a grade 1 student being a lot more successful on than a student who didn't get a grade, who was at a U? And so it's a nice indicator of kind of where your students at each stage can experience success, and maybe where is a good areas to focus on developing skills, where you're likely to be able to get students working to a good level. So it's a little bit of an overview here. There are some videos that support each of these in depth that there's the link to on a later slide, and highlight some key resources for those. But it just gives you a nice, clear understanding of kind of what are the kind of key areas at each working level, and gives you a little bit of reassurance about where you should be focusing some of that time. So grades 1 to 2, we might not traditionally think that students there might experience success with algebra, but actually solving a simple linear equation, so we're talking maybe like a one-step equation here, was something that grade 2 students were experiencing a lot more success in than, for example, grade 1. So it gives you a nice focus really, to depending on which levels your individual students are working on. When we're targeting that grade 4, it's really all about these guys here, the AO3 ratio in real context and percentages. And we'll look at some resources to support that. You're looking really crossover questions there. So all of this is all really well and good, but there's loads of practicalities in a real school, and just on screen you can see some of those there. And I think one of the big ones is that third point of catering for varying working levels and the different needs of the individuals within the group. You may well have a group who is a mix of students, some of which are actually working below GCSE and some of which are working maybe within the grades 1 to 2. And it might not be a one-size-fits-all approach for those guys, and so that's going to take some careful planning as to how can we deliver something that is going to give them the best chance of success. Obviously, effective use of support staff is going to be key. There might be timetabling options, how you need SLT buy-in if you're going to start looking at maybe offering alternative pathways for students. Would they be happy with that? Are they happy to support it? How do they want to structure it in terms of lesson time? So there's all of these things to consider, and of course anything that's different that we've not done before, there's a workload demand there. It's, getting to grips with these new resources, qualifications, or tweaking or adapting schemes of work. So, lots of practicalities to take into account there. So I thought it'd be useful to share a little bit of personal experience. Many years ago now, this was a group of 7 students that I was their GCSE maths teacher for, and I taught them from year 9 right through to year 11. And they had a range of complex additional needs, and the leadership team had decided to trial a bespoke curriculum for these groups, this group of students in Key Stage 4. So this was something that was brand new that we'd not done before, and they were called the bespoke group on the timetable codes, or affectionately the BGs. And they studied just the core GCSE subjects plus some vocational qualifications, and they were given some extra time on maths and English. So what worked really well here is that we did entry-level certificate with this group of students, and we were able to kind of choose the appropriate level for each student and manage them working on the different entry levels really quite easily. So if they were entry level 1 or entry level 2, it wasn't difficult to do. Small group round table teaching was really effective with this group. The GCSE content, tailoring the resources, so there's a lot of work on my part, but it did really, really work well for them. Building in opportunities to recognise and celebrate achievement and progress is really key. And I think some of, that is a really big thing that maybe actually, sitting for these extra qualifications can give to a student, is that a recognition of success. We held our own little results days and celebrated them with biscuits and certificates and all that kind of stuff. The challenges, that extra maths lesson that they got done with, it really led to a lot of burnout. So I think that's just something that we took away from it, was that maybe that wasn't the best idea. And there were different lessons and teachers for the GCSE and the ELC. And again, on reflection, I thought, well, maybe it would have been better to kind of almost incorporate ELC as as part of the intro to the eventual GCSE course. We had to enter them for GCSE. That's what leadership had set out. But I think they saw it as a disconnect, and I don't think they understood then how it would help them with the GCSE. Entry level 3 was too easy for some of the students, and they really disengaged because they felt it was too babyish. And we didn't know about the Edexcel Awards at that time, and I wish I'd known about it, because I think that it could have been a lot more suitable for quite a few of the students in there. But obviously we also have, particularly with any group, we did have those wider challenges of attendance and all of the social, emotional, behavioural needs that that this group of students were presenting with. So kind of lessons learned, obviously we talked about, the extra time, it was a bit of a burnout. One of the things that was helpful to counteract that was having a real structure for the weekly lessons and the interventions. So there was a real reliable pattern. And again, I think for students with SEND, this concept of reliability and familiarity is really key. So like, for example, Thursday's lesson, we always worked on a well-known interactive maths platform on laptops. So they knew that lesson, we're doing these, we're doing that, great. And so that familiarity really, really did help, that routine. And as I've mentioned, ELSA just wasn't the most appropriate qualification for some of these students. And I think a lot of people just aren't as aware of the Edexcel Award. We think we've got students struggling with GCSE, so it has to be entry level. And actually, the level 1 qualification Edexcel Award could be something that's a lot more suitable. Yeah, and one of the key points that came out was that, if we'd actually planned from year 7 for this group of students, rather than kind of, as we got to Key Stage 4 going, oh my God, what are we going to do for them? Because, it's just not working. I think we probably would have done ELC a lot earlier, and that would have been suitable and appropriate. And again, just this point about the kind of the internal assessment, I think the teacher that was delivering that element felt a little bit like, oh, this is all brand new. I'm really unsure what I should be doing. And so actually, if you are looking to deliver that, reach out, get the training, get the support, you need to be working with your exams officer as well, just to make sure that you can have that confidence in delivering the assessments, because it is really straightforward, but it's something you've just not done before. So you want to make sure you're doing it right. So year 10 and 11 intervention, this is also kind of like, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now for the guys that sit in this exam that's coming up soon? And again, I've just got that slide about those key performance differentiators. At the top there's a link to a playlist of videos that looks into each of these in detail. So some strategies that could be great for your students that are working towards grade 4. Paper societies, which is, where you get your students after school or at lunchtime, give them a load of biscuits, pass papers, and they kind of just a studious atmosphere, cracking on working through them. But, why not use the Edexcel award, pass papers, get that started at the beginning. For a lot of students, the full GCSE paper, it's really intimidating, and actually it's just going to put them off. So maybe let's do some practice papers, but use those papers, and then maybe build up to GCSE papers. Revise online, we've mentioned earlier on, but that just can create a more level playing field for students. All students are going to have kind of an equity of access to really high quality revision materials. It's got engaging quizzes on there. It helps them to organize the revision. And it really helps with that parental engagement as well. Students have got something that's really easily accessible on their phone, on their device, that's got the revision guides and checking quizzes. So that can be a real game changer. I think the price for a whole school is around about the £400 mark, but that's all these students, and it's all subjects across all exam boards as well. Again, for those that are unlikely to achieve a grade at GCSE, consider delivering that ELC qualification. And for you students that maybe lack motivation or difficult to engage or struggles with attendance, functional skills could be something that could be a great alternative and give them an opportunity of gaining a qualification. So now we're going to dive into all the wonderful resources we've got on the Maths Emporium to support you with any of these intervention strategies. So we have got a 6-week revision program that is aimed at grade 4 foundation tier. So this is great. It's fully tailored. It's already made for you. Just download it. There's a teacher guide. There's a student introduction. There's booklets, weekly tasks, and a nice tracker. So really, it's a ready-made intervention for you that can run over 6 weeks, or you could tailor that however you like, but absolutely a great resource there for getting an intervention up and running really nice and quickly. We have got our achieving and aiming for practice papers. So we have achieving a grade 1, 2 and 3 practice tests, and then there's a huge amount, there's lots of the aiming for grade 4 practice tests as well. So these are kind of they've been developed using questions that we know from all of our past series, past performance, that students at those grades have been able to experience success with. So it gives you a really great targeted resource for each of your students. There are some nice little topic tests, 20 to 30 mark topic tests, and there are the foundation theme papers as well. So this is really good for kind of quick, snappy revision, identification of gaps, or some focused intervention work where you've done an assessment, that they really need to work on this, and this topic. Great. Here's your bank of resources to go to get that practice questions for them. So you could even use these at the start of a lesson to inform what content, like if you've got revision lessons planned in, a nice little 30 mark, 20 mark topic test at the beginning to kind of just really help you understand which things do I just need to look at, kind of a little bit of practice, or what stuff actually do we need to kind of go back, reteach, revise in more depth. So again, really great bank of resources there. We have got our reordered papers. So these are just past papers that are reordered based on the actual performance. So we've looked at kind of the mean mark as a percentage, and so the most accessible question is first, the least accessible question based on actual performance is last there. So we get students doing loads and loads and loads of past papers, don't we? So, you could always give them the reordered versions. It does help to give you kind of a nice clear view of their progress over time, so they can kind of like get further into the paper than they could before. A word of warning with that, though, I don't think I would personally tell students that they're kind of increasing in order of difficulty, because I'd really want to avoid them kind of going, right, well, I can't do this question, so that means I won't be able to do anything that comes after this. So obviously, you've got to handle these carefully, but another nice way of using it, and I think to build resilience for students, is use the reordered papers, but maybe chunk them up into like 10-minute sections. So like 10-minute sections, and give them to students with a very specific objective. So the first 10 minutes, your objective is to try and get full marks or as close to full marks as you can. Right, off we go. And then we've got a break in between that to review the answers, discuss that as a class, etc. Right, we're going to have the next 10-minute chunk now. And your focus here, your objective is, want you to, first of all, just look through the questions and identify the one that you're most confident with. Do that first, and then try and do as many of the rest as you can. Okay, and again, break. Objective on the next set is, I'm going to just all I want you to do is to apply apply a simple problem solving strategy, which is to identify the command, identify the information, also find the command, find the info, do the maths. Yeah, and we'll model that for them. But I say that's your only objective on this set. Yeah, this is all I want you to do, is find the command, find the info, do some maths, do the maths as you go. We're then going to build, almost to, right, I want you to scan this section of things and identify any keywords. I want you to find a question that involves something you know about, whether that's percentages or fractions. And I just want you to focus on having a good crack at that question first. And then if you've got some time left, let's see if there's anything else we can do. So these can form a nice basis for that activity, because you kind of know that the difficulty is ramping appropriately. So I think that's also a really nice exercise for building resilience and for giving students almost like a different kind of mental mindset, as they work through the paper and the real exam. They understand that at the beginning, yeah, I'm aiming to get all of this correct, but as I'm moving on, it's about identifying those can-do marks and giving them a strategy to be able to do that. And also just having like mental breaks every kind of 10 minutes. We've got our gold, silver, bronze papers. So these are it's banks of the same questions essentially, but the bronze set has got a significant amount of scaffolding in there. On the silver, some of that scaffold has been gradually reduced, and then the gold is the question as it would appear in the live series. So these are really helpful for kind of building those AO3 problem solving skills. That's kind of really key to making that final leap towards that grade 4. So the analysis that I showed you earlier shows that those crossover AO3 questions, particularly in ratio and percentages, are really key at grade 4. So this format allows you to kind of gradual removal of the scaffolding to progress to that grade 4 standard. And I think a really good way of using these is to really enhance that kind of metacognitive effect through the questioning. So get the students to analyze, well, why was the problem broken down in that way? What was it about? How did we know that, we had to, first of all, work out the number of minutes, and how does this link to the command? So really getting them to unpick, why is the problem broken down in that way? So another great resource for doing that, I'll show you on the next slide, is the exemplar materials. But these crossover question papers here, again, is really key for your grades 3 to 4, because it's a bank of those AO3, essentially, those harder questions that appear at the end of the foundation, start of the higher. So if you've got students that are really targeting grade 4, this has got to be a real key. These are the questions they really, really need to be gaining exposure to, working on resilience with, and they've got to have obviously a secure understanding of the topics and the concepts that underlie that. But giving them that problem solving strategy, getting them to understand how to break down a multi-step process. So the exemplar materials can be very powerful tool in helping you to do this. So this is a selection of, it's a PowerPoint, and it's a selection of questions from each of the papers from each series. So it's not all questions. What we've done is we've selected, the ones with the kind of the interesting points on them. We're the ones that we know from performance data that, students will need some help with. And it gives you the, a sample of the question, it's the mark scheme, the examiner comments, and then you've got some exemplar student responses. So these are real life responses taken from the real scripts in the exams that the examiners have chosen out as, examples that we can share. So a really great way of using this in class is, and again, this is like that back end push to the exam, especially with your students that are grade targeting like grade 3, grade 4. Is right, I'm going to show you the blank questions. It's a PowerPoint, so you can kind of reveal everything in stages and get you to have a crack at it. So they've all got a copy of the question, they're all going to do it. Before we see the mark scheme, right, it's a 3-mark question. What do we think the marks are for? We're going to discuss that. We're going to maybe come up with our own mark scheme, what we think it's going to be. We're then going to see the real mark scheme and mark our own work and discuss those points, ask any questions about it. So you'll get the, sir, miss, would I have got the mark for this? Well, does it meet this? No. So you can really develop that understanding. The examiner comments are probably more for you reviewing as a teacher, but there can be some gold nuggets in there that you can extract for the class, some common misconceptions. Quite often the examiner comments will say what tactics the more successful students took. And then the kind of the fun bit, the really fun bit for the students is, right, now you guys are going to be the examiner. So I'm going to give you responses A, B, and C, and working in small groups. And this is where it's really good to get the students working in small groups together. Here's a copy of the mark scheme. Here's the responses. You guys are going to mark it now. And getting them to do that together. And then, you can ask them to present to the group, say, well, how many marks did you give response A? If you didn't give them full marks, why not? What did that student need to do better? What was good about this response? What wasn't good? And it's depersonalized, so it's not the students criticizing their own work. It's much easier for them to do this process when it's somebody else's. It's anonymized. And so really fantastic for building that understanding of how problems are broken down, what marks are awarded for, and just really developing that kind of metacognition that can be so powerful for students, kind of boosting their progress. Oh, I did mean to mention, I put the link there as well. A really nice follow-up for that exercise would to be then to get the students to kind of go back to working individually and have a go at the equivalent question from the shadow paper. So the shadow papers are essentially the same as the real papers, but just with the numbers changed. So then they're going to be able to then try and really consolidate that learning, what they've learned, discussed, and apply it. So that's going to really kind of boost even further the benefits of that exercise. So a few moments, I think we've got about 15 minutes left. So we've got about 5-10 minutes to a quick highlight of some specific support for students we send, and should leave some time for any questions. The maths toolkit, as we mentioned, but really, really key. That whole concept of repetition, familiarity. So some real specific support on how to deal with unfamiliar or an unexpected contexts and questions. This, and we kind of think just by exposing students to as many different types of questions as we can, that's doing that, but that's not the same as some real targeted support specifically focused on developing that skill for students. And that will need to be personalized for each individual student with, depending on what their kind of need is. And then this is part of what I mentioned earlier about developing that mental toolkit. So giving them strategies, resources, and experiences to enable them to really engage with and enjoy mathematical problem solving. So it's all about building resilience. So if you've got a student who just gets massively kind of overwhelmed, and they get quite emotional or upset if if they encounter a problem that they're struggling to understand, because they don't get it, can't do it, we need to kind of really focus this kind of activity on building resilience and learning from their mistakes and seeing how that then leads to success. The exemplar activity, which is really depersonalized, following up with them having a go at the shadow questions, is a really nice way of doing that. You might take out that first step where they'd had a go at the question, so we're almost kind of that they're not having that chance where they've gone, oh God, I've got it wrong. What you could do is you could model doing the question first, then we'll mark it, then we'll look at the exemplars, and then give the student the chance to have a go at the shadow questions. You can use our exemplars. To be honest, you can create your own. It's easy to do, isn't it? Some questions that have got mistakes and things in them, and that can be really helpful for students that have got that kind of mindset. But that's just one suggestion. As I say, it's got to be really personalized for students, but a real focus on that, and maybe seeking support from your Senko as well about understanding the students' particular needs in that area. Online resources such as Active Hub and Revise Online can be really beneficial for students with special educational needs. And individual pathways and goals, having a pathway set out for them with really clear measurements of success and key milestones and celebrating those as we go. Some specific resources, we've got the Access to Foundation tier, which I mentioned, that kind of bridges the gap from entry level 3 to the GCSE. You can see this is really great resource as well for supporting maybe support staff as well who are working with students, so maybe non-specialist support staff, because it's got lots of teacher notes, guidance. It's got some really nice little activities and tasks you can do with the students. You can see an example on screen there, but this can be a great resource for supporting students, particularly when you're doing a little bit of one-to-one work with them. There are some context-free papers as well. So this is where we can remove the context from questions to just simply leave the maths. The original question is still included. So a great exercise it can be really helpful in helping your students to build connections. So we can do the red questions, the context-free bit, because, all right, great, they can do the maths, they can perform those calculations. Now let's actually have a chat about how was that connected to the original question. So like, how did we know that it was a subtraction? Why do we have to divide by 2? So then building that connection to the original question as well. So that they are a nice resource, particularly for that, developing that skill. Obviously, there's some specific support around access arrangements, and there are dedicated pages on the Pearson website to support you with navigating all of that, and modified papers that can be ordered for candidates, possibly. So this can be like enlarged papers, interactive PDFs, and you can see there are some deadlines there about ordering those. But again, the link to the Pearson page gives you all the information that you need to be able to see whether that's appropriate for your students and get those ordered should you need to in future. The controlled assessments for ELC and functional skills. So this is the tasks and the tests that you do in class. They can use physical aids, manipulatives there, and there's detailed guidance in the assessor guides for those as well. It's also worth noting that our functional skills specialist, Chris Briggs, has run lots of really great specific training on supporting learners with different special educational needs in functional skills. And those videos, training videos, are on the functional skills playlist on YouTube. And then we also do have some resources around supporting inclusion and literacy in maths as well. And again, they're on the Maths Emporium and linked there. So just as a recap, obviously we've got that range of different qualifications. So there's something there that can maybe be more suitable for the needs of each individual student. You don't have to enter them for a given qualification. You can opt to do that, or you could simply choose to use those resources and past papers to support your students in class. But it's about having that early identification, those early discussions, and developing a pathway that is going to be most supportive for each individual student. There's a wealth of resources on the Maths Emporium. I assume you've all got a Maths Emporium account login, but if you haven't, please do just go to that website, register, and we can get you sorted. So at that point, we've got kind of about 8 minutes left. If there are any questions, Seb, I know has been monitoring the chat and probably answering lots of stuff in the meantime, but if there's anything there that's we've not covered, then we can have a look at those now.
Yeah, hopefully I've been able to sort of provide enough links and those things. There was one question I was going to pose to you that came up, which was around international centres. For obviously the entry level certificate is available for international centres, but what
It
are the
is,
options
yeah.
available sort of beyond that? I sent some links to the lower secondary qualification. But my suggestion might be that obviously we also have a subject advisor for the international as well. So perhaps
We
best
do,
way to get in
yeah,
touch with
Mark,
you.
as well. Yes.
Yeah,
So
might be
ELC is
getting.
available internationally. Functional skills isn't. Functional skills is only available in the UK. But our general qualifications, such as ELC and I believe the Edexcel Award, should be available to international centres as well. But functional skills isn't. That's definitely UK only.
Yeah, I
And as you
believe
say,
functional
there
skills.
might be some other international qualifications, but I know that lower secondary is kind of pitched at the more challenging end, is my understanding. But
Yeah,
Mark is definitely our international partner, would be able to help you with any specific queries on that. If you email teachingmaths@pearson.com, then we can definitely kind of hook you up with the right person to answer that query.
fab. So there was that, and then there was just a question that came in from Georgina right at the end, then, which was around. So would a learner on entry three functional skills maths be allowed a clock face in an exam? And I think some of those things around specific rules are, come from the JCQ, and they come from around the ICE document, which we would always have to refer to. And I'll see if I can quickly find a link to that.
Yeah,
Be able to
and there are when you register for the assessments, you get the full packs. There's an assessor guide that's included with each one, and that has detailed instructions for what is allowed, what's not allowed. There was some briefly on that slide, but I appreciate it probably wasn't on screen for very long, but you should be able to refer to that in the slide deck as well. But again, if you can't find the answer to that easily when you look at the assessor guide, then please just do give us a shout.
I've just popped a link in as well to the access arrangements and special
Yeah.
considerations for the JCQ as well. Just having another little look. So could Claire asks, could a year 11 pupil now be entered for GCSE and award level 1, or is that not advisable?
They could be, yeah, that's fine. You've got an opportunity to enter them both in the June series. Obviously, the entry deadline for our summer series is the 21st of Feb. So you want to make sure to get those entries in before then to avoid any late entry fees. And that's the same entry deadline for ELC. Again, you can enter students after that, but that you would incur a late entry fee. So functional skills, there isn't that deadline on there. That kind of can be done at any time. But yeah, no, that there's no reason why you couldn't do that.
Yep. And then there's a few questions asking about the recordings and the slides. And so I can see that Adeline has put in the links to the slides. If you want to review this recording, you can use the same Zoom link that you used to join. You'll be able to view this. In the next week or so, we'll also get the recording up on our YouTube playlist, and it'll be available through the Maths Emporium. And I'll see if I can quickly drop a link to our YouTube playlist in the chat as well.
Thanks, Seb. So hopefully we've answered all of your questions there today. If there is anything that pops into mind, or this kind of a session has got your mind ticking and you're thinking, oh, I need to look at this, and this at some point, a reminder, you can see on the screen there, this little contact box in green, you should see that at the bottom of any of the qualification pages and the Pearson Maths and Statistic page. You can kind of email me. So teachingmaths@pearson.com. Any queries you've got will come straight through to myself there, and we can address those. And then there's also an opportunity to book a Teams meeting with me, and that's something that especially centres that are looking to maybe deliver a qualification that they haven't delivered before, like ELC or an Edexcel award. They appreciate, you can have 20 minutes, we can chat through the specifics of your individual setting, and make sure that you've got everything you need to be able to get set up and deliver that qualification appropriately. So please do book a meeting with me or email me if there's any further kind of specific support that you would like. I'll just check. Yeah, so I think I can't see anything that we've not covered. Oh, that's nice, Charlotte. Thank you. Charlotte says, yes, did have a direct Teams meeting. It's really easy to book. And to be honest, it's my favorite bit of the job is chatting with you guys and just getting to know more about your students and coming up with ways that we can really support you to deliver something that's going to be really supportive and give them that chance of success. So if we've covered everything off, then we'll kind of leave everyone to say goodbye, and we'll close the webinar shortly. But thanks so much for attending, giving up your time at the end of a busy day, and wish you all the best for a lovely and restful evening now.